Just a quick introduction. I realized many of you are probably thinking this is about tips and tricks to get students, maybe yourself, more in tune, more adept at starting piano lessons, moving through piano lessons. Maybe you're expecting technique and practice ideas and motivating the process. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your perspective, this video is not quite that. This has 15 years of teaching behind it, and I'm going to be talking about the biggest stumbling blocks and issues I see with students. And none of them have anything to do with actually playing the piano or learning or technique or timing or notation. So let's go. So you want to give your kid piano lessons. This has been a lot of marbles rolling around in my brain for a while now. I am going on 15 years of teaching lessons, and here are the basics, the essentials, the stuff I don't think anyone talks about when it comes to teaching, because you have at least two things I've observed that really catch parents off guard. And your kid is definitely smart. That's the first thing. We need to establish if your kid is in school, they're getting their grades, they're functioning somewhat, whatever that means, they're smart, right? And that's also where it gets really weird because of all the games they want to play when they don't want to do something, right? And of course, the smarter the kid is, often the more ridiculous the games they can play. And so we'll be talking a little bit more on that later. The main thing is, piano is one of the loneliest instruments in the world. It has to be one of the most depressing and frustrating things to learn, because everything else in school, even if your kid's homeschooled, even if they have a tiny social life, they still have some level of support with friends and parents, maybe with teachers that are keeping some accountability and positive reinforcement going on with their network. And if they're in band, if they've played other instruments, they have even more support, because you get to play together with your friends, and it feeds into that great loop of learning together. But piano does not offer that. Piano is almost the opposite. Piano is probably one of the biggest mental tests for a kid, because parents quickly give up. I've noticed this with every single student. There's maybe 2 to 5% of parents who are paying attention 6 months into lessons. Every other parent, I'm not sure what's going on there. They seem to think I, as a teacher, maybe they think teachers in general have some magic wand that gets waved a couple times a week, and the kids are going to supernaturally figure out things without much parent involvement. Which makes sense, right? I'm doing lessons for a half hour each week. The rest of the week, the kids are with their parents, they're with their friends, they're traveling and doing whatever kids do. So it would make sense that 1/2 hour in your entire week is enough to work a bunch of magic on chaotic kids. So that is the first thing we need to point out, is that the real magic when it comes to music, the music magic is happening when I'm not there, ironically. The magic is happening when your kid, your little toddler student, starts learning on their own and figuring out how they learn. That is when the magic happens. And annoyingly, unfortunately, as the teacher, I am not involved in that process, hardly at all. I am on the sidelines making little tiny adjustments and tweaks, pointing out what's probably something to work on. And so that just feeds more of the negative problems with the lack of social support, because you have any other activity your kids might be involved in, they have a bunch of friends and teachers and a whole collection of good vibes, right? But when it comes to piano, the one person that's consistently showing up, the teacher, they're only pointing out things that the kid's doing wrong. So this is that first thing I've noticed, that parents really have no clue what to do with this. And I have no clue what to do, right? I don't have kids. I'm completely outside of the loop on what's going on in a regular household with kids. And I get clues, right? I can figure out the parenting style pretty quick and observe what the parents and kids' relationships are. But one of the main things that seems to happen is that parents quickly start orbiting. They get in this mode about 3 weeks into lessons. The parents want to just have this remote control setup with their kids at piano lessons, and that's completely the opposite for a long-term musical career. So I need to point that out. If you want your kid to succeed in music and become adept with an instrument, the parents are going to have to be just as engaged as the kid is. There's going to be a level energy that rises and falls with your kid. And that's all entirely based on the parents. The kid's not going to do it. And again, there's maybe 2 to 5% that fall outside of these observations. There's always a couple kids that show up here and there that blow my mind, and it makes my job way too easy. I don't hardly have to teach. I'm just kind of I just get to watch genius at work, right? I don't have to do much anything. And so the irony is that the better the student, the less I have to teach. So the second thing I've observed, that was the first thing, to recap. First thing is that parents, if you want your kid to go into in music, especially piano, the kid is going to be entirely dependent on the energy you are bringing each week. And maybe that's the problem right there. Maybe parents just don't have the energy. Maybe parents give up way too quick. And I've had so many parents in the last 5 years quit lessons with their kid, claiming all sorts of ludicrous things, right? Oh, we're too busy. Oh, they've just, have lost interest. And I would put good money on 99% of the situations the parents are the ones that lost interest, not the kid. Because kids instinctively love to learn, right? You see it with kids everywhere. No matter how crazy they are, no matter how serious they are, they love to try something and figure something out. And especially if their kids are involved, it's even more so, right? They love to goof off and experiment and test things out. And parents are the complete opposite, right? Parents don't want to test anything. Parents just want to have a most predictable routine set up every day, right? You don't want any surprises. You don't want anything unexpected. You want to know what's going to happen, when and where. And of course, these are quite extreme views, right? These are not applying to everybody, but I say that to make the point that a year, 6 months, definitely a year into most piano lessons, parents have completely zoned out. And the kid or kids completely fall apart because of the parents' lack of interest, and the parents are the defining factor for your kid's musical success. So anyway, that is the first point. The second point is similar, right? Your kid is crazy smart. I said this at the beginning. No matter what your kid is telling you, your kid is insanely intelligent and capable, and they can definitely learn piano. I've had over 100 students in 15 years. Not one of them got me thinking, they just might not be made for piano. And I kept thinking that would happen. For probably the first 5 to 8 years, I thought I would eventually meet a student and end up thinking, maybe go try violin, try any other instrument. The piano's not for you. That never happened. And it makes sense now. It totally makes sense. Because, like I said a couple minutes ago, we are all made to learn. The human mind is built, set up for taking on information and learning. And kids are always the best obvious example of that, right? They, no matter what your kid might struggle with or what they don't like or what they pout about, they can learn. So that's the second observation I've noticed. And the greatest trick is, the greatest trick kids pull is convincing their parents they're a bit dumb, right? The smartest kids out there, they are experts at convincing their parents that they have some learning issues. They just can't figure something out. They forgot something. Oh, what was that? And we're back. Do sunglasses make me look more intimidating? So just to confirm, your kid is so smart, and their crowning achievement is to convince you they're just a little slow sometimes, and piano is a little tricky, and they just can't really figure it out. So this leads into the main advice for getting into moving towards an actual healthy piano education. The kid has to figure out with your parents, with you, you're figuring out with your kid a setup, a system, a routine, a habit where they are focused with their lessons, with the materials, with whatever the instructor, teacher put down for the week. That is the essential. And every single student, if they do not do that within a month, they will struggle so much. They will go way slower than they should. They will constantly have to waste time with their teacher, who will have to continually repeat things over and over again. And I've noticed often I can't win when the parents fail to set up a structure for their student and enforce that structure, where there is a routine hour on the piano, half hour, whatever works for your student. I know sometimes they completely fall apart after 20 minutes, and then you're setting up 20-minute increments, right? I tell all my parents they need to make sure their kid is on the piano at least 3 hours a week, or else there's no point. You're like, there's no point taking lessons. So that is a minimum. The other question I get all the time is, what age is a good age for kids to start lessons? And it's kind of funny. I thought I knew the answer to that. I used to say 6, because most kids have some counting and alphabet skills. That's very essential to your introductions to music and counting and notation. And so I thought that was right. That is wrong. And now whenever parents ask me when our kid's ready, I ask it's no, it's when you're ready. It's when the parent is ready to be a parent to their kids and make sure that 6 months into lessons the kid is still getting that move from the parents, that push, that paying attention, that attitude that is reminding the kid, getting them on the piano, focusing. And that is, I feel, the correct answer now is there's no right age. I've had a 3-year-old student. I currently have an 82-year-old student, and it is all the exact same for everybody, regardless of your age. You're ready for lessons when you can focus on the piano and the material. And so, of course, with age, the only difference is that at some point, usually in your teenage years, there's a point where you start doing it yourself. The mind figures out how it learns. The parents aren't as important anymore. You're self-aware. You're becoming independent. You know what you like and how you can figure out things for yourself. But most kids before that stage, they're very needy. They have a lot of excuses. They're constantly bouncing from one thing to the oranges and the bees and the outside and the inside and asking random questions. So those are the two things. Just to recap, getting your kids into piano lessons, the number one thing is that it is extremely tricky. It is so difficult and painful because I don't think parents think about this, that the piano is very lonely and it messes with kids because they're used to having a social system, friends, and that feedback everywhere they go. They're used to that loop of people, right? They're used to all of that noise around them everywhere they go. And whatever they're trying to learn, they have that person there. They have at least one person that's constantly supporting them. But piano is the opposite, right? Me as the teacher, the only person usually. It's difficult for kids to understand how I'm supporting them. I'm constantly saying how things are wrong. So that's the first thing. And I forgot earlier that tied up with that first thing, which is extremely tricky as well, is that piano is often the most difficult for very book smart kids. Kids who have never had to work in school. They've never needed to study. They've never had to really figure something out. They've been able to coast through their studies and they get great grades without that much effort. Piano is so painful for them because all of a sudden they feel dumb. And for kids, I bet that is the worst feeling in the world. Feeling dumb when you've been told you're smart your whole life, when you can figure everything out, when you've not had to focus or apply yourself. All of a sudden now on the piano, you feel so worthless and helpless. So that's something I forgot to mention earlier. You parents with really capable kids that are, completely trouble-free in school, they get to an instrument like the piano, and all of a sudden, they don't have their friends, they don't have all their teachers they're familiar with, they have some random person like me at the piano with them, and it's really difficult. So that's the first and a half bits to recap. And the second thing is getting that system in place. Your kid, no matter what they say or think, they are constantly addicted to your energy and your feedback. And as the parents, your complete attitude towards their piano lessons dictates everything your kid will take to the piano into lessons. And I've seen way too many parents, I've met way too many families where the parents are in some cuckoo land and the parents seem to think that their parenting style, their attitude is filtered. they seem to think that all their decisions and actions and, you know, their habits, they think that's just letting the good stuff come through, and that their kids and me, the teacher, just get the best of the parents. And of course, it's the opposite, right? When someone's being really, really annoying, you kind of forget all the good stuff about them, right? When someone's being really difficult and manipulating and trashy, right? That's all that really matters, right? For how long? Well, it depends, right? And I've noticed that parents get really delusional, thinking that their poor parenting habits, their dumb decisions, parents get really weird, thinking that that doesn't filter into the piano. So that needs to be said over and over. I wish sometimes I could give parents a rating, being like, hey, you're getting an F today for a complete lack of support and motivation. And right now, the kid, my student here, is controlling this whole house. I wish I could say that. Maybe I should say that sometimes. Because I don't think any parent wants their kid in charge of the house. I'm pretty sure all you parents, you want to have some fair control and oversight and responsibility and all that good stuff in your home situation. And yet, when it comes to piano lessons, I don't know about anything else, but for sure with piano lessons, kids have this way of taking over control. It just in bizarre ways. In fact, I remember the most extreme example, this student I started, we did not even have 6 lessons. I think it was between the 4th and 5th lesson, I get a text canceling lessons and teacher because that kid was in control. The parent had completely given up all responsibility. And I still wonder, should I have said something? Should I have been like, hey, you should be in control here. Don't let your kid dictate this, And just as a bonus here, as a teacher, I've noticed that parents with successful students, they tend to do what teachers look for. And this is my own take, because I've always been maybe too self-aware, too forgiving of bad parents, because I never went to school for teaching or music. I've had to figure all this out on my own. And there's these patterns that I've realized make or break the entire learning process. You have kids who want to do things their own way. You have kids that are very distracted, jumping around. These are all patterns that build up over time if you allow them, and they take over the kid. They take over the entire lifestyle and decisions. And the parents and teachers, everything we hope for with raising successful kids and building their talents and growing their chance for success in life, is about setting up those patterns that offer the best chance for success. So you have, in piano, you have very simple patterns that I have to set up right away from the very beginning, with learning notation, understanding counting and rhythm and technique, and the curriculum presents all of that for the students to follow, and I offer basically guidance, right? That's all I can really do, is give the guidance and motivate them and get them to understand how they're doing something correctly or incorrectly. But then I'm gone, right? I'm only there a half hour a week, and then it's the parents' job to continue that pattern, to point out, based on what I've written in the notes, what's in the curriculum, what's presented for the kid to understand. This is where the parents make all the difference by ensuring students are holding to those patterns and understanding what they need to work on. So that is the bonus roundup for this podcast, whatever this is, sermon, basically in church on what I've learned 15 years in the piano lessons. Because for a long time I thought I was the problem. For probably 8 years I thought I was a bad teacher because I never went to school for teaching. And it started to dawn on me after I realized that I know what I'm doing now. I've learned, maybe most importantly, what not to do. And I've learned that with each student there is quite a specific mindset I have to get into for the half-hour lesson with each individual. They all have their own personalities, and they all have their own way of reacting to being told they're doing something wrong. And I have to handle the variety of those reactions and personalities with each student. And then after realizing I know what I'm doing now with that, it started to dawn on me that, okay, parents are a little behind on this. So I hope this has been helpful. I hope maybe you're wanting to put your kid into some sort of school, music school, education, whatever, lessons, even, chess club, robotics club. All these kids are adults now. It's so weird to me how kids used to just goof off and hang out with friends and play around outside for hours, but now they have to all be adults and have careers before they can, even graduate, it seems. It's kind of bizarre. So I hope your kids are still getting free time and they can enjoy living life on their own terms for a few more years before that completely vanishes forever. But music is one of the most incredible tools for building the best patterns in the mind for success. And Albert Einstein and many other gifted individuals had a love relationship with a musical instrument, and that is no coincidence. So definitely consider putting your kid into some sort of music career, even if it's just for themselves. Even if they don't think they'll be good at it, that's okay, because when you start enjoying something for yourself, you naturally become better at it. I had 11 years of lessons. I hated 8.5 of them. I never thought I would go anywhere with music for 8.5 years. And then I discovered Franz Liszt, and very quickly, within about 3 months, I completely changed from thinking I would never, ever do anything with music to a complete sold out, dead to everything else, where I cannot do anything but music. So you've maybe noticed my channel is littered with nearly 3,000 videos. I have 3 albums of my own original works and a Christmas album. And this has been the last 6 years that I finally realized I have to not just have a little tiny career of music, but I want to make my entire life in music. But that's not for everybody, but it still began as a very personal process, and the whole journey with piano started inside of my head. And that's what I know everybody can come to love. No matter if you never make any money, no matter if you never play in public, there's the massive world of music inside your own heart and head that can be developed and grown into an amazing part of your life. So that is the final wrap up. Go check out my music.